pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, roll, Atlantic.
Water towers, fly!
Flight downside FTE off.
Yikes. You bet. Okay. We don't need any more of these.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of NASA Spaceflight Live. I will be the host this week. My name is Thomas Burghardt. I am an editor and writer for NASA Spaceflight, and I'm joined by two familiar faces to those who watch NSF Live every week. We've got Chris Bergin right above me, founder and managing editor of NASA Spaceflight. Chris, how are you? Good evening. And we've also got Ian Atkinson, writer for NASA Spaceflight. Ian, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here.
Awesome, and big welcome to everyone in chat and everyone who's tuning in. Thanks for joining us for another week of very important and exciting spaceflight news. We've got a bunch of stuff to talk about. We've got some Artemis program news, some more hardware arriving for the first Artemis 1 mission coming up. We're also going to give an update from Virgin Orbit, who recently completed their investigation into their first demo flight, which did not reach orbit, and we're going to look ahead to when they might try again. And then we've got a bunch of big SpaceX news to talk about. First and foremost, the Demo-2 mission coming to an end with the successful splashdown of Crew Dragon Endeavour this week. And then, of course, the monumental Starship SN5 hop test that went so well earlier this week. We're going to talk about all of that and more this week. Lots of things to talk about. And first and foremost, I believe we're going to go to Chris B for an Artemis update. Chris, what do you got? Okay. Chris, can you refresh your page, please? We're trying to get you unmuted. We're off to a flying start right now. We'll get Chris unmuted for you guys. But yeah, we've got a bunch of different Artemis updates to talk about. We've got hardware that's arriving at the Kennedy Space Center, multiple pieces of hardware, and that's all for the first Artemis 1 mission. And we know our good friend Chris B loves to talk about SLS and everything Orange Rocket. So we'll get him back in 1 second here. We tested this 3 minutes ago, and it was working perfectly, for the record.
Yeah. Who broke it? Hang on, we've got 5x5 now, is it?
Do we hear Chris now?
Yeah, that's worked. There we go. Hey, I'm back.
I can hear Chris. Check. Can you hear Chris? All right, we can hear Chris.
We
all
don't
right,
know what
good.
happened, actually.
Chris,
yeah?
Let's try this again. What's new with Artemis?
I don't know. I've forgotten now. No. Well, where we're at now with SLS is quite interesting because it's now seeing hardware arriving at the VAB, at the Kennedy Space Center, which is always a sign of a mission coming up. We all remember with shuttle, with the external tanks arriving at the turbasin. We also saw the boosters arrive by train. We're seeing the same sort of thing here now. We're seeing the boosters arrive first, which is normal as well. What happened with shuttle? We've seen the segments arrive just last month at the Kennedy Space Center. The external tank part is the core stage, and that's still at Stennis. That's on the B2 test stand. So that's still waiting the green run. And they're halfway through testing with that now. We've got what's called the launch vehicle stage adapter, which is a pointer bit, to quote Tim Dodd, where we've got, which will go between the spacecraft itself and SLS. It's a very key, it's a very boring looking part of the hardware, but it's a key part of SLS. And you can see it here being constructed at what was Marshall Spaceflight Center. A lot of people think this was at Michoud, but it's not. This was actually built at the Marshall Spaceflight Center, the largest part of SLS to be built there, which is quite interesting because Marshall Spaceflight Center is a huge NASA center, but it's mainly management, it's mainly planning, documentation, organization. It's not really a factory as such. That's mainly done at Michoud at New Orleans. So this to be built at Marshall Space Flight Center is quite interesting. And it's custom built, and they're building at least 3, we know, for SLS, which is the next 3 missions, obviously. And the one that's been built there is now shipped to the Kennedy Space Center. We can move on to the next slides because we can see what it looks like as it was constructed. And hopefully we'll see, there we go, look at that. It's literally just a cone. That's all it really is. It's a cone, but it's got the avionics inside. It's got structural elements to it, which are obviously required because this is a huge vehicle that's going through Max Q. there's a lot of aero stressing on this vehicle. Remember when, not to go into SpaceX too much, but remember when Elon Musk was mostly concerned about two things: the stress on the center core and staging with the boosters. This is why the hardware aerodynamics of it, the stresses, the aero stresses on these vehicles are very important to get right on the computational side. And the test launch will be Artemis 1. That is a good reason why it's not crewed. So they're going to see how the stresses compare on this part of the vehicle itself, because this will be going through a lot of stress on top of the core stage between the actual Orion itself. So we'll see how it performs. But yeah, it's an interesting part of the vehicle to say it's not visually interesting. And there it is riding on the Pegasus. Pegasus has been expanded itself. Pegasus took the external tanks from the Michoud Assembly Facility to Kennedy Space Center. And now it's carrying the core stage and the launch vehicle stage adapter. And it was rebuilt for that purpose. It wasn't actually long enough and tall enough to carry the core stage of SLS. So now it's been expanded. It took about a year to rebuild it, but it's still the same Pegasus barge. And now it's going to take the launch vehicle stage adapter, and it's done it. It's taken the case Space Center. It's going to sail back, and hopefully, within a matter of months, we'll have a core stage that's been tested on the B2 standard Stennis, which was past the green run, and it'll be taking a core stage itself to the Kennedy Space Center. And then everything will be at KSC for Artemis 1. So it's all about staging. That's an iconic picture. It's iconic because anyone who's followed shuttle will remember external tanks and orbiters rolling past the outside of the VAB, ready to go to what's called transfer aisle, which is like the middle, it's like the reception room for the VAB. And then they get lofted into the high bays. There's 4 high bays in there, and 1 high bay will be used for SLS. And that's when it'll really get real for people, because remember, they did a quick test with what was called the Pathfinder, grey rocket gun, we used to call it, because it wasn't really anything more than a grey structure. I think we can move on to that one after this. There's another iconic picture. You can see the doors there, actually, for the transfer aisle. A lot of people think the VAB is just one big square building. It's actually a square building with a big transfer area, which they go through these big doors on the center there. And that's the transfer aisle. And then they get taken through by crane into all the high bays. And high bay 2 will, in fact, they're going to use a high bay for Omega, which may not survive now because of the recent awards, which is quite sad, really, for all people involved with that rocket. But 1 high bay will be dedicated for SLS, and that's where that's going to go. That's going to be turned into the transfer aisle and waiting for SLS to arrive. I think the next slide, move on. There we go. We've got what looks like the interim core propulsion stage, which is the upper stage part of SLS. They're using the ICPS first on the first few missions. It was originally for 2 missions. Then they're going to move on to what's called the EUS, which is the exploration upper stage. That is more powerful. That's got 4 engines on it, 4 IL-12s, 4 IL-10s, I should say. And that hopefully will be coming online by the middle of next decade now. They are delaying it. They're going to use this, what's really used for the Delta 4. That's the upper stage for Delta 4, but refined slightly to make it into the ICPS. So many initials, so many acronyms. It's ridiculous, but they will be using that one on Artemis 1, that one itself there. They have got lots on order. I think got 4 on order now for SLS. And they will be what's called the Block 1. And there's the core stage herself. That's with the 4 RS-25s on it. That will be green run, test fired for a full duration firing, hopefully before the end of the year. It could be within a matter of months. They're halfway through what's called a test schedule, the green run checklist. You've seen SLS actually tick the boxes on Twitter, and they're halfway through now. SLS actually put out a press release without tweeting it for some reason last night, saying they're halfway through the checklist towards the green run test. And the green one will see the 4 veteran RS-25s. They've all flown on shuttle. They will fire up for the full duration of the SLS core stage, first stage run with the boosters and through to Mika. So it'll be literally an 8-minute ride on the test stand. And that will be some sight, because we've seen single engine tests on the other test stand at Stennis, and they are powerful. They really are. They really are impressive to see on the test stand doing their static fire runs. So 4 engines will be fantastic to see, and I'm looking forward to it. I think everyone should look forward to it. I think everyone should get this T-shirt, because Orange Rocket is good.
Oh, he's already plugging the merch, everyone. Yeah. He's already plugging it. We actually have a question related to this topic. Someone, Riley wants to know when that green run is expected to be finished. Do we have a schedule on that?
A preliminary schedule. I mean, they keep talking in a matter of months. They're looking at this checklist and they're ticking off the lists, the milestone lists. and they're saying we're getting closer to it. But every time I've seen the date has changed. So I don't like to give a date myself. It's pointless at this stage. I think they just want to pass the milestones and get to the point where they're on the last milestone where they're going to say, okay, now it's time to go for this green run test. We'll set the date, we'll invite the media along, and we'll do it then. I'm hoping in the fall. So let's just see what happens.
Yeah, I know. I would be thrilled if that becomes a big media event that we can go to, because
It
I would
will.
love
It
to
will,
just
yeah.
stand there and see 4 hours 25's fire for 8 minutes.
Mm.
But thank you. We've got a couple. We've got another question here about Artemis. How are the SRBs ignited for launch? So that is another piece of hardware that is currently at the Kennedy Space Center.
Yeah, the SRBs, it's literally a shuttle solid rocket booster with one extra segment. It's a 5-segment SRB. They are amazing, really, because the saying used to be boosters were called dumb boosters because that's all they did, were fired, and they were just part of the pushing the spacecraft and vehicle uphill. Elon's changed that now. They're no longer dumb boosters because they're now landing on drone ships and landing back on land and being reused. So he's completely blown that dumb booster line out of the window. But SRBs are technically dumb boosters because they are literally just full of solid propellant. There's a gap down the middle. They actually mandle it out. And it's got like a star-shaped gap through the middle of the actual solid segment. And they actually fire a chain down it. And they set it alight that way. And then the whole thing fires and there's no stopping it. It'll fire until it's exhausted its fuel. The only way it'll stop firing is if it exhausts its fuel or blows up. They're the two things that'll happen with a booster, with a solid rocket booster. And yeah, the main part of the solid is the actual avionics on the bottom of it, the aft skirt. That's what's got the TVC, the thrust control system, which moves the nozzle. When you'll see it with SLS as well, when you saw the shuttle roll as it launched from the pad, that were the two booster nozzles moving opposite directions and twisting the stack. That's how it moved it through thrust vector control system, which is a giant silver arm which pulled like a piston on hydraulics and pulled the nozzle backwards and forwards. That's how the shuttle steered, along with its engine nozzles as well. So yeah.
Awesome. And we've got a couple more questions, but we're going to move on to another segment. So keep those questions coming in the chat. This is a live interactive show. And towards the end, once we have covered all our main news segments, we like to do something called Max Q&A, where we go through a bunch of different questions that you have asked throughout the show. We keep them in a queue and we keep track of them, and we'll come back and rapid fire answer more questions. So during the entire show on any spaceflight topic, please send questions in the chat. If you tag at NASASpaceflight, that helps us pick them out, and we will go to a rapid fire Q&A session near the end. But a lot of great news for the Artemis program. We are now going to move on to another update, this one from Virgin Orbit, and I believe Ian's going to tell us a little bit about what's going on there.
Yep. So Virgin Orbit, they're finishing up their investigation into the failure of the first demo flight of their Launcher 1 rocket. And for those who are unaware, Virgin Orbit, their Launcher 1 rocket, it's an air-launched rocket. So what they did, they took a modified a 747 that was used by Virgin Atlantic, and they added a pylon under the left wing and attached the rocket to that. And so what they do, they take off from the Mojave Space the Mojave Spaceport in California. They'll fly over the Pacific Ocean, drop the rocket, and the extra altitude and the extra speed from the airplane will give the rocket a little bit of an extra boost to help increase its payload capacity. So Launcher 1 is a small sat rocket. It's comparable, a little bit more powerful actually than Rocket Lab's Electron. It can carry about 500 kilograms to a sun-synchronous orbit, whereas Electron can only take 300. And so their first demo launch, which took place on May 25th of this year, it ended in failure, but they released an investigation about what caused it and how they're moving forward from it. And so they announced that they discovered the issue, which occurred on the launch, was a rupture of the liquid oxygen line going to the engine. And because of that, the engine couldn't get any liquid oxygen, so the vehicle shut down and the launch was terminated just a couple of seconds into flight. But they announced that they were able to get some good data from that. They were able to get some vibrational data so that they could share that with their customers to tell them how gentle or how rough the ride would be to orbit. And so they're preparing to get ready for Demo 2 now. And to help prevent this issue from happening again, they've discussed that they are strengthening the liquid oxygen lines. They'll be doing more thorough testing to make sure that all the components can withstand the forces of launch. And they'll be trying again with the launch of Demo 2, carrying 11 of NASA's CubeSats, a lot of which are built by universities from around the country. They'll be doing a test flight of that later this year. They don't have a solidified date yet, but they're going to be moving step by step, doing captive carry tests, fueling tests, wet dress rehearsals. And as you can see from the picture on the screen, the rocket in the foreground, that is Demo-2, and the one in the background, it will be the third flight. So you can see Demo-2, you've got the second stage the second stage on the left and the first stage on the right. Those will be joined together and make the complete Demo-2 rocket for Launcher 1. Yep, and that's the end of their update.
Awesome. We've got a couple questions here about the Virgin Orbit news, and there's actually one that I think I'm going to take really quick. Randy wants to know, or is asking about the pylon that you mentioned. So the 747 aircraft, in fact, I'm going to bring that image up again because it's such a good one. Well, if I can find it, here it is. So you can see that the rocket is actually carried underneath the rocket right here. I'm going to use my fancy telestration skills that DOS set me up with. So they've got that pylon underneath the plane wing, and that's what allows it to carry the rocket engine. And Randy asked that he thought that it was an existing standard for the 747. What I can tell you is that the wing is strengthened in that area in order to support an extra pylon there, but the pylon itself had to be specially designed by Virgin Orbit to accommodate the rocket specifically. So that's the difference there. But yeah, so it's taking advantage of the 747's strength in that area to carry extra payload in the form of a rocket. So that's what that is. And then we've got a question here from Jared, and and maybe you know this. Is Virgin Orbit affected by the bankruptcy filing of the Virgin mother, like the parent company? Do you know?
So overall, I do not know the answer to that, but I believe it's very minimal. I haven't heard anything that's affected Virgin Orbit from it. They have not announced anything. I think it's a separate company in the big Virgin market. You got Virgin Atlantic, Virgin Galactic, Virgin Orbit, and all the other ones. So I think it was just really, it's not a major impact to them. They haven't announced that they're pausing operations or that they're slowing down or anything. So I think overall it may have a slight impact, but they've said nothing of it. So it doesn't seem to be major at this point.
Good to know, and we know there's a bunch of Virgin companies, and there's multiple companies in the spaceflight industry because we've got Virgin Galactic doing their Spaceship 2 things and things like that. They announced a Mach 3 airplane the other day. They're doing a whole bunch of stuff. But yeah, so good news there, and I think we are going to move on to another mission called Demo-2. Lots of companies naming their missions Demo-2 recently. We've got some big SpaceX news, and you can see it in the thumbnail there. Bob and Doug, the two astronauts on SpaceX's first ever crewed mission, have finally returned to Earth. And I think we don't have like someone dedicated to talk about this because I think we all want to talk about it. But Chad, do you have questions about Demo-2? Who wants to give like a brief synopsis of what happened this week?
Tell you what,
I
I'll
can go
start
ahead.
because it's
Go
just
for it.
interesting how we've finally got rid of that monkey on the back, which was where Atlantis landed on SES-135. Chris Ferguson gave that speech at Wheel Stop, which cut me up because he thanked every single orbiter, including the two lost ones, for keeping them safe. And that struck me at the point where we had Atlantis with their APUs firing like a tired racehorse, and that was it. That was the end of America's capability to launch their own astronauts to a space station they mainly paid for. Just let that sink in for a bit. That's just stupid. The world's most powerful country, and it doesn't make any sense at all. We had the promise of Orion and Ares doing ferry flights to the ISS before going taking astronauts to the moon, which never happened. We had, luckily, the foresight many years ago, to set up commercial contracts for crew and cargo. Commercial crews worked, now commercial cargo worked, now commercial crews worked. And it's a testament to the planning, to the patience of NASA and the commercial contractors, including Boeing, because they're working hard to get Starliner working and doing it right. They're reflying their OF2 flight, their demo flight, which is not with crew. And we now finally have Bob and Doug back safely, concluding a flight with the Crew Dragon. The gap is over. So that, to me, when they splashed down, was the actual ultimate conclusion. A lot of people classed it when they launched, but I thought, no, wait till they're safely home. And so was Elon. And now they're back home. It's over. The gap is over. It hasn't sunk in for me. What about you guys?
It's been very cool to see. Yeah, I agree. It hasn't really sunk in yet that we are now
Mm,
able to launch people back to orbit. It feels like we still don't have that capability because it's been so long since we have. I remember I watched the last shuttle launch. I was in, what was it, third grade, I think. And I
make me
watched it
feel
and I was
old.
like, now what? What do we do now? Is this in my mind, the shuttle was the rocket. There were no other rockets. I was like, well, that's sad. We lost
Yeah,
our capability there. And now we're back in the game now.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I didn't know. I mean, I obviously I followed the end of the shuttle program, but I wasn't so deep into it as a journalist or anything like that. So the first time since then, we're having a crew vehicle go through the reentry, like communications blackout
yeah,
and like that kind of thing. Like obviously, I've watched lots of shuttle land or Soyuz landings, and but for like some weird reason, and I can't really think why, but it's just different when it's an American vehicle. The same things happen. There's a reentry communications blackout. You're waiting for the chutes to come out and you're waiting for touchdown. The same three things happen today. Obviously, it's a water splashdown, different chutes, different vehicle, but the whole experience was just a little different when it's this brand new. And I guess it's because it's such a new vehicle.
yeah,
Maybe as Dragon flies more, I'm gonna dare I say this will start to feel routine again. Because at some point during shuttle, it did feel a little routine because it was happening so often, and
yeah,
maybe it'll get to that point after a couple flights. But yeah, going through that tense blackout, and I think we're lucky that they came out of blackout like 2 minutes early, because the it would have gotten super tense had they gotten to that like 4 minute mark and not been out of it yet. But yeah, the it was just an awesome experience, and yeah, I don't know if it has really sunk in yet. I definitely am excited it happened. I'm glad that it went so well. Um, I think I'm looking forward to Crew 1 is my main thing, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Crew One is going to be very exciting to see, where it'll be the first operational mission to Dragon with 4 astronauts on board. So we'll be seeing it sort of get into action there. And I don't think they actually have anything going in the trunk, but it'll be interesting to see, along with CRS-21, which will be the first cargo Dragon 2. That'll be carrying up, I believe it is the Bishop airlock. So it'll be fun to see Crew Dragon really taking over from Cargo Dragon and also blazing a new path with carrying crew.
I'm very excited to see what the Cargo Dragon 2 ends up looking like, because it's gonna be
Mhm.
way different from the Crew Dragon or the original Cargo Dragon variants, and
yeah,
I love seeing new spacecraft, especially ones because normally when you have the unique spacecraft, it's like stuck in a payload fairing and you don't really see it well. The Dragon spacecraft don't get a fairing; they just sit right on top of Falcon 9, and I love to see a new sort of Falcon 9 stack that looks different than any other mission.
yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that. We've got a couple questions. First of all, you got a super chat from Micah. Ooh, 10 pounds. I'm amazed by your coverage nowadays. Followed you for about a year now. This is one of the best channels. Well, thank you, Micah. We appreciate your support, and everyone who does super chats and channel memberships greatly appreciate it. But let's talk about commercial crew here. And we just mentioned Crew 1. What is the no earlier than launch date for that mission, the next crewed SpaceX mission?
It's end of September, isn't
September
it?
of this year.
Yeah,
This September, and that's going to be carrying four that are three NASA astronauts and one Japanese
Japanese.
astronaut, right? Did I
Yeah,
get that right?
Yep.
I was
Yeah, it's
trying not to mix it up with Crew 2 because they
yeah,
recently announced that one too.
mhm.
yeah,
So yeah, Crew 1 no earlier than September of this year, and that's obviously fluid, especially because Demo-2 was still a test flight, so they have to review all of that data and make sure everything is what they expected it to be and things like that. So a little fluid there. They're not fully into operational timelines, if you will. But so September there. Let's see. Elias, is the Dragon capsule still capable of landing with the Dracos instead of parachute in case they don't work?
no,
Nope.
no. That's that capability. They looked at it. They tested it in McGregor with what was called Dragonfly. We saw it doing little bouncy hops on the end of the end of wires, technically on a crane. So the Draco, the Super Dracos do work, and they are obviously on there for the key part of the abort. That's what they're needed for. The plan was to use them for landing, propulsive landing, but that was scrapped in the end by Elon and the SpaceX team. So that is no longer an option. The option they use them for is for the abort during launch. If the parachutes failed, would they just flick a switch and hope for the best? I don't know. I wouldn't like to think about it. The primary purpose why they're on there is for the abort, launch abort.
And I think a SpaceX representative did say that the Super Dracos aren't even available to be fired after after it separates from the Falcon 9,
Yeah.
just to make sure there's no issues, like they don't accidentally get activated while in orbit, because that would be very bad. So I don't think there's really a chance to do it. Um, it seems like such a zero chance of it not zero chance, but such a low chance of it happening, and such a high risk having to test all the systems to make sure that it could work, and having to go through qualification with NASA. It was probably just easier to add a fourth parachute than to add the Super Dracos.
Gotcha. And on the note of Demo-2 and its return, do we have any information about what sort of cargo or experiments that capsule brought down? We had Bob and Nug on the way up, which is obviously the most important cargo on board, and they came back down. But was there anything else on board?
Yeah, there was. They did carry some cargo up. I believe it was about 200 kilograms of cargo. They carried that underneath the 4 seats, where the other 3 would have been if they were carrying 7 seats. So they had a few bags of cargo there. They had a few freezers, I believe. They were carrying some university experiments, some general cargo up there, and they did bring back some as well. So Crew Dragon is able to bring back a solid amount of cargo, whereas Soyuz can't. And I think you could see in the image with Bob and Doug sitting inside Dragon, I think you might be able to see the cargo at the bottom. I'm not sure if. Oh no, you can't
Okay.
really there.
There's like 1 or 2 bags down there. I'm not sure if that's cargo
Yep,
or if that's other supplies of some kind.
it might be, but yeah, they have the bags, the whole storage area is on the floor underneath their seats there. So yeah, they did bring back some cargo.
And they also brought back the flag.
Oh, that's
Mhm.
true. The other important cargo.
Yeah.
So for those who are not familiar, that U.S. flag was brought up by Space Shuttle Atlantis on STS-135, the final shuttle mission, and was only to be returned to Earth by the next crew to launch from Florida. And that, of course, was Bob and Doug on Demo-2. And that flag will go where next, Chris?
That flag will go on an Artemis mission around the moon. So it's now going to fly. It's going to be a pride of place on STS-1, STS-135, Demo-2, and Artemis 1. Or Artemis 2, I think, because I think they'll wait till it's a crew launch. So
Yeah,
Artemis 2.
I think it'll
Yeah.
go with
Yeah.
the crew on Artemis 2.
Yeah.
And also, I saw
Around
someone in
the
chat
moon.
mentioned they brought back the Little Earth that they launched up on Demo 1.
Oh, of
So
course.
another
How could we
you
forget?
can't leave it out.
It's a fun world where Little Earth is more relevant than the flag that's flown on.
Well, I think the
over
flag is
30
more
years of
important, and I've
spaceflight.
got it on screen there now.
Although, to be fair,
Yeah.
I'm a fan of it too.
Yeah, the Little Earth zero gravity demonstrator, along with the one from Demo-2. What was the name? It was like a dinosaur. What was the name? Tremor?
Trimmer.
Tremor?
Something like that, yeah.
Okay, so
Tremosaurus or
a
something.
couple microgravity indicators on the way down, the technical term. But let's. What about Dragon Endeavour? So that was of course what it was named by the crew. That Dragon isn't done now, right? What's going to happen to it now?
Well, it's going to keep the name, isn't it? I'll let Ian talk, but I was first of all going to say that it's going to keep the name, which I think is a lovely touch because that's how the shuttle works. So, yeah, I'll let Ian take over.
Okay, so yeah, Dragon Endeavour will fly again. It was announced during the Demo-2 mission by NASA that they have approved the use of not only reused capsules, but also reused boosters on crew flights, and that'll be starting on Crew 2. And notably, Bob Behnken's wife, Megan MacArthur, she will be flying aboard Dragon Endeavour in the same seat Bob did on Crew 2 to the International Space Station. And that'll be, I believe it's early next year, sometime around March or April.
Yeah, early next year, and that's will depend on when that Crew 1 date firmly gets set up at. But yeah, that'll be super cool to see. I mean, and my question, and we were talking about this during the Demo-2 return. You can see in this picture, the capsules get pretty. I mean, you think the boosters are scorchy when they come back? These capsules are a completely different color. And when we saw the first Falcon 9s get reused, they kind of cleaned them up a little bit. You could usually tell if you looked closely, like, yeah, this one's flown before, it's a little dirty, but they were mostly cleaned up. And now later on, I mean, you see a booster after a couple of flights and it's black
Yeah.
when it started out, pure white. And I'm wondering what will happen with the Dragon capsule. We've seen the cargo Dragon capsules; they get cleaned up pretty nice. I would imagine, at least initially, the
yeah.
crew capsules will look the same. but it would be awesome to see sort of a scorched Dragon capsule on a scorched booster. What do you guys think?
It would, but I can't picture them doing it. Just, I think because of the way the focus of the meter is on a crewed flight, I think, I don't know, I just can't see it. I think they will have to take the spacecraft apart for post flight anyway. It's not the same as the booster where you just basically do a few checks now along the seam line and then the engines. They will have to do a proper check and replace the heat shield and do a lot of work on it. So I think we will see a nice shiny white one, but it'll still be the same vehicle.
Yeah, I could see them definitely changing out the heat shield and also the external panels, because it does look like they took a lot of damage. So either they're going to polish them up or replace them altogether. I'm not sure. They haven't talked much about how they refurbish Dragons, because I know with the commercial cargo program, especially towards the end of it, they were reusing cargo Dragons left and right. So they didn't really go into too much detail about what they have to do to refurbish them, just that they keep the pressure vessels. That's all that I know.
And on the note of Cargo Dragon, we've got a question here. Will the Dragon 2 cargo look very different? Isn't it just the same as a Crew Dragon, but without crew on board? What's the difference between the two?
So Cargo Dragon 2, it will be a similar pressure vessel, but it will not have Super Dracos, and it will not have any seats on board or display panels. I'm not sure about the windows or any of the other external features, but so the inside will be pretty much bare bones. There'll be no seats, no display panels, nothing that would support crew in there. So it could fit as much cargo as possible. And I would assume that the trunk would not have any fins on it, since they don't have Super Dracos any ability to abort anymore. But so it'll probably be similar. It'll look probably like a hybrid between Cargo Dragon 1 and Crew Dragon.
That's a good point. I didn't even think about the fins because they're only really there for aerodynamics during an abort, and you're not going to have an abort mode on a cargo spacecraft. That's interesting. So that'll be, like I said, that's one of the many reasons we're like interested to see them come, because we haven't seen any like pictures or renders of the new Cargo Dragon from SpaceX or anything, so we don't really know exactly what it'll look like. I'm definitely looking forward to it. But thank you guys, and we're going to go on to the other big SpaceX event of the week. For those of you who may have been tuning in, we had it live. Hold on, I'm going to pull up the video because I know that's what we all want to see here. Oh, hold on, I want the original. But we've got a big piece of news from the other SpaceX facility down in Texas. Starship SN5 has finally made its hop test, and I am struggling to open this link, guys. I'm sorry. Here we go. There's a picture from SpaceX, a drone picture. The Starship SN5 prototype finally made its 150-meter hop test, and it went perfectly. And Crispy's going to give us a quick recap of the significance of that this week.
Yeah, just look at that picture. That picture says a lot, because it's not just the amazing view of a cylinder grain silo flying on a single Raptor with a mass stimulator as a hat. It's surreal as it is. You look at the background, you've got Bluezilla, the big crane building the high bay for the super heavy boosters. You get a production facility. Just a few years ago, that was just a beachfront. And they've built a facility, a launch site and a facility to produce these vehicles. They've gone through all those pops, those dramas, the splashes, the test tanks, and they've got a Starship to fly. It's amazing, really, because we all had confidence in SpaceX, their personnel, their talent, and Elon driving them would make it work. But after so many close calls with the failures, we were starting to wonder how long it would take before they get it right. Would it have to wait till a new alloy came out where they could get the welds to work properly, so it wouldn't lose the problem? It wouldn't have a problem with the static fire test or the propellant loading. And SM4 kind of got us there, because we knew it wasn't SM4's fault. That's a mouthful. When it popped, because that was a ground support equipment issue. So SM5, we had more hope. We definitely had more hope for SM5, because we knew that SM4 was structurally good. And it went through all these tests. It went through multiple tanking tests, not by design, but because they scrubbed static fires and they scrubbed launch attempts. One because of a fisherman's boat, which is surreal, a range violation, as you like, even though it's not really a range there. And then finally, we got through to this where they were preparing to launch the damn thing. and it was off its hooks. It was ready to launch, and it seemed surreal at the time, but it happened. And here we go. I'm just watching the video myself now, because it's still, we watch it back and it still doesn't seem quite real. It's a power slide off the pad. We all knew that was coming, but when we saw it, it really was emphasized. It does literally, there you go, because it's off kilter Raptor positioning on the aft, and it slides off the pad. Took part of the launch mount with it, and there's a Raptor you can see there, flying high into the air. 150 meters was achieved. We heard on the SpaceX video there's a loop where it said, yeah, good engine pressure, good engine performance, good pressures. So it wasn't, you know, seat your pants. It was working as it was designed to do. Came back through the dust, and now we all start thinking, please don't do what Hopper did, where the engine started going the last few seconds, because she literally embedded her feet into the pad because she lost thrust at the last few seconds. We wait for the smoke to clear, the dust to clear. We're all wondering. There was no loud bang. So we all thought that was a good sign. We're all waiting for the dust to clear to see if she was still standing. And eventually, you know, I think this is quite slow, this.
You think it was slow now? How
We know
about
we did
watching it
time lapse,
live?
it's
It was
fast.
really
We're
slow.
We're on slowed down time lapse. It was faster in real life. Pardon me. And then the dust clears, finally. And we see she's still standing. And the SpaceX is where Mary was cheering. Just gave an extra effect where everybody was pleased that they finally got it to work. And now they can go on to the further tests where there'll be more hops. Hopefully with SN5, we don't know yet. We don't have to retire an SN5 or not. But right now, we don't think they are. We think they're at least giving her a chance, maybe to top again. But look, some of the visuals are amazing. You can see the placement of the Raptor isn't quite in the middle, just quite slightly off. And the Raptor kind of caught fire, but it was a minimal fire, and it didn't affect the performance. So that's fine. We've seen RS-25s catch fire kind of on this test stand at Stennis. So we know that there's certain allowances for that. And that's what they're designed to cope with. They're designed to cope with the fire coming out of the nozzle. You think they'll be able to survive a little birdie fire on the aft. And there's a SpaceX video. You can see the power slide. You can see the launch mount getting absolutely ripped to pieces. It doesn't look too bad, actually, in post-flight. It was part of just the...
It looked worse in the video than it did in
Yeah,
photos
it did,
afterwards, yeah. We were joking on the stream that SpaceX has made their rockets reusable, but their launch mounts expendable.
Yeah, that's pretty much what they like doing, disruptive technology. They've got all these nose cones as well with nowhere to go. Nose landing legs, which came pop back out, which was great. And I think we've got a little bit of a latency on the actual live stream. There we go, we're back. And it's just, the little legs which pops out were hilarious because they are literally about the size of a person almost. They're going to make them 2 meters tall at one point, I think. Elon did said the whole stack will be 2 meters taller, and that is because landing legs. And then on the video itself, it said full duration. So it was a full duration test of the Raptor and a successful one. The engine performed, SN27 performed very well. Will they put a new Raptor on for the next time? I don't know. They have got other Raptors at McGregor. I think they've got another Raptor at Boca Chica. So it'd be interesting to see if they do change the engine out or if they want to fire it again on the same vehicle or a different vehicle. We know that SN8 will be a 3 Raptor vehicle. So they do need Raptors coming through McGregor and firing like this. Perform like this would be fantastic. You can see the ACS thrusters firing to keep the rotation, slight little rotation there. Most of the translation was done at launch, which was fascinating as well. By the time it got to the 150 meters, it had got across the landing pad. And then the trick was to come straight back down on the landing pad. And it achieved it. It wasn't even off the landing pad. The landing pad isn't massive. So to land on the landing pad itself was some achievement as well. So it obviously showed it could provide the right thrust vector control on the actual Raptor, which was a problem during the testing. Elon himself said they were testing the thrust. They had concerns of the thrust vector control system, but that performed well during the hop. We can see on the pictures here from Mary, who filmed the live stream, films all the videos, gets all this footage, and this is a great photograph from her as well because this is the heat shields which they're testing for the future flights, and a few obviously popped off. We don't know if they were hit off by some debris flying from the launch mount or if they just vibrated off, but that's why they're on there. They want to test, see how they perform, how they're attached, And most of them did survive, obviously. Most of them still on there, but a few came off. And you can see the CLPVs are all there. They're all fine. So they all stayed on. Unlike Starhopper, one of them flew off at landing, which was a fun thing to see, even though it's not what you want to see. Yeah, it's a great, great success for SpaceX.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the other stuff happening in Boca Chica because, yeah, there was a hot test, but the folks at SpaceX don't particularly care if a test flight's going on. They're going to keep building stuff. What are we looking at here?
So that's
Yeah.
sorry.
Go on, Ian. No, you take it in.
Alrighty, so what we're looking at here on the left, that's a nose cone. It looks like it has the header tank installed. So that's a liquid oxygen header tank. And what that is, it's a small tank to store landing propellants. They specifically load them into there so it'll be stable. There won't be sloshing in the tank. And those are used during landing, and that's up in the nose cone to help with the center of gravity. Then on the right of that, the stainless steel section, that is a 5-ring tall section, and that will help. The nose cone will be stacked on top of there to form the actual fairing. And then that whole assembly with the 5-ring section and the nose cone will be stacked on top of the tank section, which we saw fly a few days ago with SN5. And then that will be a complete Starship. And that will be happening with Starship SN8, we currently believe. And that's if plans hold. And it seems like the plans are changing every 30 seconds down there. So we'll have to see. But yep, and you can see there, it's on the right, that's SN8 being stacked. SN6 is on the left. SN6 is completed. It's pretty much being stored there in the mid bay, in case they need it, if SN5 goes kablam during one of the tests. But so far, it seems like they won't need it. But SN8's on the right is testing a new steel alloy, 304L series. And essentially what that means has a lower carbon content, so to produce cleaner welds overall. And we have seen SpaceX has had issues with welding in the past. So having easier welds is, I'm sure, really appreciated by the team. And so SN8 is being built there on the right. That's about the center section of Starship. So you have the common bulkhead there in the middle. And you can see the oval opening on top. That's actually an access hatch so workers can get inside of it. But yeah, so SN8's being stacked. Its nose cone's being readied. There's a lot of progress going on at Boca Chica. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, the interesting thing for me is SN5 and SN6 are pretty much twins. They are the same kind of vehicle, same kind of construction techniques, and the same alloy, 301, sorry, I should say. Now, if SN5 does multiple hops, great. If SN5 does multiple hops and fails on one of them, SN6 is ready to complete that test program if they need it. But then we'll move on to SN7.1, the test tank, which is the first vehicle to be made out of the 304L. And they'll do pressure tests like done with the other test tanks to validate their welding, to validate the alloy, and then that should clear the path for SN8, which we've seen there, which will receive the nose cone and the nose cone section to be the full Starship stack without the Super Heavy, with 3 Raptor engines, with canards and with fins, and that will be launching much higher. We're probably talking up to the 20 kilometers, which is the next milestone they're looking to achieve with Starship. And that will achieve also another milestone, which will be the landing technique, which is a belly flop. Comes down belly flops and swings its aft out the last second with its engines firing and lands as normal after that swing. That I want to see like you would not believe. That is gonna be incredible to watch. It's gonna freak everybody out, which would be funny. Starship you watch it for the first time. I always like non-spaceflight fans going, "What? Is that meant to happen?" Yes. So, I am really looking forward to that, and that could happen this year. That's the crazy thing about all this. That could happen this year. The way SpaceX's cadence is down there in Boca Chica is incredible. They have nose cones to spare. They have literally 3 Starships there now with SN5, SN6, SN8 almost built. You can imagine all the sections are built already. You've got bulkheads for SN9, SN10 probably inside the big tents. They have got so much hardware down there ready to go and ready to test. If they can keep achieving milestones like SN5 has achieved, I honestly wonder the next thing we're going to see is Super Heavy. The high bay is almost past halfway. It's past halfway now. It's on level 3 or 4. So we know that it could have parts of so Super Heavy, so many vehicles. They could have parts of Super Heavy inside that high bay by the end of the year. The launch cadence is incredible. I am so used to NASA vehicles and even ULA vehicles and all, even Blue Origin. Look how far How long have they been talking about New Glenn? They've not got a rocket inside a building yet. And Boca Chica is going through all these Starship prototypes. It is surreal. We've seen nothing like it before in history. I can only think back to the mass array of Atlas boosters inside that factory building during the 60s, those pictures. But they were small vehicles. These are huge vehicles. So I am beyond excited by what's happening here. And I will say it again until people are sick of blue in the face of me saying it, because Mary is filming all this, all hours, putting up with a terrible internet connection down there and letting us edit these best we can to properly portray what she sees. Her footage is amazing. We want to portray it in the right light. It's a lot of work, a hell of a lot of work, more than you can imagine. And we are forever thankful for her because she is filming history. I said it in a tweet, which was quoted by a certain President Trump.
Oh, we're going to bring that up on the show? All right.
Yeah. I'm not political, so I don't care if it was Biden or Trump. It's still, oh my God, to me. Elon RT'd Mary's clip of the hop, and President Trump must have seen it from Elon's feed, and he RT'd it saying, NASA was there before I took over, which was wrong, but that gained so much attention. I don't mind the attention because his followers, who might not be into spaceflight, some of them might now be into spaceflight. So you got to take the bonuses with it. But some of my DMs and notifications were horrendous. I was offered tons of money to reply to that tweet with a political message, tons of money. And I don't reply to it, by the way, with saying in the last 2 days, SpaceX achieved Demo-2, and now this hops, so too late. Unlucky. I'm not political, so it wouldn't have worked. But yeah, it shows that this has caught the imagination of people. It really has, to the point that so many people now know what Starship is. And a year ago, maybe a specialized spaceflight community. But yeah, I'm fascinated by it. I'll let you guys talk now, because I'll talk for 10 minutes longer if you give me a chance.
Well, we've got a huge queue of questions. I always love, because we have our question queue here, and every section a couple will come in and everything like that, and then we'll hit our Starship question. I have to scroll down my screen to get to all the questions. So there's plenty of interest here. So let's just dive right in. We actually had a question because you brought up NASA is not super closely connected to the Starship development program. It's primarily a privately developed thing. But there is now a small connection in the fact that it is one of these designs being studied as potential for a moon lander, to which NASA would be paying for and develop and basically buying a service to the lunar surface and back, kind of like they do with Crew Dragon and things like that. And so Brian wants to know: is data from these flight tests shared with NASA early on, or does that wait till later? What's the status of that connection between NASA and Starship development?
That is a brilliant question. That really is. I'm going to try and find out. I'm going to ask a few of my friends at NASA. That is so interesting because we know there's two parts to this. First of all, this is all a SpaceX funded project. This is SpaceX's money, and they're developing this spaceship on their own dime, which has its benefits and also puts its strains on things. But they have already won an association with NASA, with HLS. So we know that there's money in the bank from the development fund towards a human landing system with Starship. So there's a NASA association that might have allowed NASA the access to the data. That might have been the key to it. I don't know for sure. I'm going to find out, because that is a great question. I should have asked it myself a long time ago. I would love to know if that's happening now. But going down the future path, I think this vehicle has got a big part to play past just the HLS system. I think it will have a large part to play at least alongside SLS for deep space missions, because of the capability it brings. The cost is far less than SLS. It could be added to the SLS budget easily, and you'd have so much more capability sooner. You would save a lot of money in the long run, because when you pay for a program like SLS, you're paying for the workforce across the year. If you launch 1 or 4 times that year, it's the same cost. Shuttle had that problem. It's called a financial year budget, where you pay a set amount of money. If you launch 10 times that year or 1 time that year, it's the same cost. So I hope SLS and Starship provide some kind of a tag team in the future. I'll find out that answer. That's a question now. I'll find out.
All right. Well, we got this amazing photo. This is a drone photo that SpaceX released of the hop test and is great for this next question because someone wants to know what causes the diamonds in the Raptor exhaust. And I can actually take this one. The
Oh,
basically you'll see this in several different rocket engines. You saw it on the shuttle RS-25s. I'm trying to think if there's any other big. I feel like you could see it in Delta Four main engine shots, but lots of those and lots of like afterburning jet engines also do this thing. It's basically the air outside the engine compressing the exhaust from the rocket engine, and you can kind of see it kind of shape into little diamond shapes and then kind of come back out, and it kind of does this over and over again. And that's just the effect of the atmospheric pressure actually compressing the rocket exhaust after it comes out of the nozzle. Basically, the pressure in the nozzle is less than the atmospheric pressure. And that happens when the exhaust is at supersonic speeds, faster than the speed of sound. So that shows you how extreme the forces in that rocket engine are. And this photo, I mean, shows them beautifully for Raptor. We've seen a couple like test stand videos where you can see this beautiful. They're called mock diamonds or shock diamonds, and I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous. And that's just the engine. I mean, if you look, this photo overall is gorgeous. I'm making this my new wallpaper or something. But yeah, so that's why the exhaust looks like that. Let's talk about that SN5 launch mount that we saw blown to pieces by SN5. Do we know where there was like a small secondary explosion kind of at the launch mount, and some debris got flown up and stuff. Do we know what that was about or anything about that?
no, I think it was just one of those propellant lines, which we've seen leak a few times or used for detanking. I think it probably still has some prop inside it. So when the Raptor's thrust, as you just eloquently mentioned, has so much power, when it hit the actual mount, it probably during the power slide was caught one of those lines, and that line just went, nope, I don't want to have anything to do with this Raptor exhaust. I went, bye bye. There we go. It does look like it was a line and part of the mount itself as well. So obviously it exploded and took part of the mount with it. But that's a small price to pay for a very successful flight. And they've lost mounts before with them going pop on the mount. So I think that's a good result overall.
Yeah, and they have another launch mount that they
Yeah.
built near the landing pad, and it's just sitting there, just waiting to be used. So, worst case scenario, they just remove the one that got roasted and bring that one over. So they're all ready to go with the second launch mount to just quickly get back-to-back launches.
Okay, and then what about that? We saw near the end of that clip, there was that small fire that we talked about on Raptor that wasn't part of the nozzle. It was kind of up on the
No,
piping and the plumbing for the engine. Do we have any information on that?
I don't think we do. I think Tim always asks Elon the relevant questions, and I don't think he gave a reply to it. I might be wrong, but I don't think he did, and I don't think it was a major problem. No one's really reacted to it thinking, oh my God, we need to change that Raptor out. So I think it was just one of those things. It might have been just a small line which leaked. And of course, under those pressures and under that heat from the Raptor, just caught a bit of fire, but it didn't expand. It didn't affect the performance of Raptor, most importantly. So I think that's just one of those things. We've seen fires on Merlins, haven't we, before? Like small fires. So I think maybe it's just part and parcel of engines. Sometimes I don't want to sound like I'm making excuses where everything SpaceX does is brilliant. It might be a problem for all we know, but we don't know the actual answer to it.
Yeah, I think the main piece of evidence is that the hop went smoothly. The flight was
Mm,
perfect, and like we said, we saw a minor engine issue at the end of the Starhopper hop that ended with a rougher than you
yeah.
planned touchdown. We didn't see that for
No,
SN5.
and the
Uh,
key was the on the loop. The controller said full duration. If the engine was
yeah.
on fire, literally on fire, as soon as they got on the ground, they would have ceased the engine. They kept it going for a little bit longer to get the full duration. So that to me says it wasn't a major problem.
Absolutely. And also, some people were pointing out that after landing, the SN5 was actually leaning a little bit, but that we
Yeah.
believe that was not a sign of like a hard landing or anything, right?
No. No, I think it's just these tiny little legs, which
Yeah.
has been the amusing response by some gifs of sea animals with tiny little legs flashing around, which as a grown middle-aged man shouldn't laugh at, but I do. Um, It's just the way it's just the way it's landed. They're not stiffened legs. They've got like a spring to them. I don't want to say crush core, so we don't know if they've got crush core or not. I don't think they have. I think they're just the way they're designed to lessen the impact of a landing. That some of them have taken more of a brunt to it than the others, and that's why there's a slight lane. But it's no big deal at all. So the fact that we're even talking about it just shows that's how well it's gone, because we're picking what's in, like, it's got a bit of a lean. That's what
Right,
Twitter were
yeah.
all saying as well. They're all saying, "Is it leaning a bit?" I thought, well, yeah, it's better than it being exploded. So, yeah, it's
Right,
small.
yeah. I know that, and there's been plenty of Falcon 9 boosters that have touched down and maybe had
Mm,
slightly rough landings and were like leaning a little bit afterwards, but it was never an issue with like that meant it was a failed landing. There's
nah,
give that, and they design it with that in mind. So
yeah.
nothing too concerning there. We've got a question here about some of the other construction going on in Boca, and I've got this amazing video from Mary of all this construction going on. So I'm just going to play that in the background while we talk about some of this stuff. But at the launch pad, they're doing some drilling. Do we have any idea what that's about?
Was it the drilling for, if this occurred like about a month or two ago, that would be the foundation drilling for the Super Heavy launch mount. And what that is, they're driving piles down, what are essentially large amounts of large pieces of reinforced concrete going deep into the earth to have a deep foundation, to have a solid grounding for the launch pad. And so they finished that up, and it seems like the foundation work's almost done on the launch pad. But
Yeah,
that happened a few months ago. That's
that
over
was
by
a few
now.
months ago. I think they're still actually working on that area, but they're also drilling another area, which we think is an old oil well or some kind of well as such. It did catch us out because when I first saw the first clips of it from Mary, of course, it's always Mary because Mary takes all the videos. Just plug in Mary again. We thought maybe it's another part of the Super Heavy pad, but no, it's completely away from that area. It's a different area. I can only assume it's some old well, something like that. And if they're striking methane, that'll be amazing. That'll be somewhere ISRU, isn't it? Where they're using in situ resource
That's the
utilization.
genius
Yeah.
of being in Texas. There's just fuel
They found
everywhere.
methane. Yeah, that'd be good. No, we don't know fully yet.
But that is towards that Super Heavy pad, and that leads into this next question because Daniel wants to know when we will see Super Heavy booster construction, that first Super Heavy vehicle. So who's going to take the wild speculation and throw out a Super
So
Heavy appearance date?
I'll start with it, and then Ian can correct me with his probably more sensible suggestion, because my overly ambitious mind says we're going to see Super Heavy segments inside the high bay by the end of the year. I honestly don't know if that's
I think
realistic
that's
or not.
fair.
I agree with that.
It's just the way that the high bay has been built. It's been built at a pace that we'll see it completed within a month or so. I
Right.
am not taking into account the internals. They'll need a crane system like the VAB at KSC. They'll need a lot of instructional inside it, but just knowing how SpaceX work, they wouldn't be opposed to using it, even though it's not completed, as a storage facility. What better to store in there than the first rings of Super Heavy? So
Yeah.
I'm going to go for end of the year, and I'll let Ian go with his guess.
Yeah, and to go on to what you were saying, they actually used the mid bay to stack
Mhm.
SN3 while the mid bay didn't even have a roof. The walls
Yeah.
were halfway done on it, and they were still stacking Starship SN3 in there. So it wouldn't shock me if by the end of the year we did have some segments of Super Heavy, like individual rings. Maybe they're testing out welding them together. But I don't think we'll see like actual construction on the first one start until early to mid next, or early next year probably, and then mid
Yeah.
next year they might take it out on the launch pad.
I just want Mary to get a photograph of a ring with a label, as they always write. It's almost like they write it for her, with a label on it saying Super Heavy segment ring 28, something like that.
Right.
Anything with Super Heavy on it, I will lose my tiny mind.
Yep.
And then
it'll
we're
be
going to
fun
have
watch,
like Super Heavy SN1, and we're going to be like, oh no, we're going to start confusing these things with Starship SN numbers. But yeah,
Yep.
I think you mentioned that you think they're gonna need a crane system for the Super Heavy high bay. They didn't put a crane system in the mid bay or the Starship high bay. They've been using
Oh,
sort of external cranes to do their stacking, right?
yeah, and not just that, they've actually got a crane system inside the mid bay, which is like a elevator, which encompasses around the Starship inside there. It's a clever little system. It's like It's almost like a ride. It's like one of those fairground rides where you go up to the top of the ride itself and you drop back down again at speed. It's one of those things. It's horizontally mounted. It's not. It's vertically mounted, I should say, not horizontally mounted. The VAB crane is along the roof, along the top of the roof, and it moves along the top of the roof like that. The one in the mid bay goes up and down the side of the wall and carries people up and down the side of the vehicle. So I wonder if they'll do something similar with the high bay to a larger extent, because it'd be taller as well. So there'd be some system. But if we start seeing some kind of rails along the side of the building, let's look out for that, because that'll be a clue of how they're going to do it without a crane or not. And then they would, to bring it outside the high bay itself, they could bring in Bluezilla and just use Bluezilla to bring out the actual stack. So we'll see. But it's just another fun thing to watch.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Thomas.
No, I was going to say, I think Super Heavy rings in the high bay before the end of the year is a reasonable prediction. I don't think that's outside the realm of possibility.
And looking at the high bay, it seems to be a very wide building. So I think you'd have to get the crane inside of the building in order to stack something in there. So I think it would make sense if they went for a gantry crane. And there's something, they have a gantry crane sitting down there in storage already. If we all remember that, back when they were expecting to launch Falcons from here, they built an entire shed for a gantry crane. I have no idea if it would fit. I doubt it would, but maybe they're building it around that, because the gantry crane is just sitting there waiting for a use. So maybe they could use a gantry crane. Maybe those drive a Bluezilla kind of crane inside of it and stack them in there. But it's going to be interesting to watch it.
We're going to take one more question on Starship here, and this is on the topic of Raptor. What number Raptor is SpaceX up to, and what is their rate of production? We've got a lot of Raptors in need when they build that Super Heavy booster. That Super Heavy booster is going to need 31 Raptor engines. And how is SpaceX going to meet that goal?
Well, they're going through McGregor at pace. They've got 3 test stands. They've got 2 horizontal test stands, and they've got 1 vertical test stand, which is the former tripod pad. It's still a tripod pad, but it was used for Merlin engine testing, Falcon 9 core stage, before they moved to its own test stand at ground level. So they've got 3 test stands for Raptor. They've got the potential to add more, but if they can test fire Raptors at the pace of, say, 6 or 7 a week through that system, then they'll have a nice stock of Raptors for the test program until the end of the year, and then they can look to ramp up production. Because we know they were looking to do a Raptor at least, 1 a day at one point. I think Elon said something like that. The cadence of building Raptors. And they will need that kind of cadence for Starship and Super Heavy when it's operational. So that makes sense. I don't know where they're up to right now. Probably about SN39, something like that. And I think that's where they'll be. So I think they'll have enough Raptors ready to go for SN5 rehopping, or SN6 hopping, and SN8 hopping. And then we'll see where we go from there. And that will take us through. I don't think they're short of Raptors. Let's put it that way. They're not short of Raptors.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think they got to get an SN8 hop test, which will only need 3 Raptors, which we can all say with fairly certainty there are 3 Raptors available to support that. And then, whatever further Starship testing there needs to be. So they've also got time to build up a fleet of Raptor engines, if you will, before you need a Super Heavy booster. So not a concern for Starship testing. Before we move on, we've got a couple super chats here. We had a joke about, we were talking about Demo-2 versus Soyuz. The difference between Demo-2 reentry and Soyuz was that you can understand a chatter without a translator. This is true. No Russian speaking on the comments. Thanks, Harry, for the super chat. Bester says, amazing coverage, guys. What do you think the Starship's cargo variants massive fairing can enable in the future? A huge telescope, maybe? What kind of payloads do you see in Starship going forward?
Well, we had that render, which is still famous on Twitter, showing a Lever telescope inside the fairing of a Starship. The fairing system's called Chomper, where it literally just opens up like an alligator and it pushes it out. And they showed that telescope, and it was never denied, but NASA keep saying it's not ours. Someone made this up. We never proposed it. I don't know if it's that. I don't know if they have proposed it internally and it got out and they think, oh, we've got to deny this now. But that is an example of something that could go up. A big telescope. Someone said they could try and rescue Hubble. I don't know if that's viable or not. There we go. There's the chomper.
Yeah, I
Pushing
just
out
went to
big
the SpaceX
payloads.
website. This is the little animation they've got of like a big satellite being deployed.
I mean, that's a huge satellite. And the way satellite technology is going now, they don't need a really big satellite. So I wonder what its main customers would be. I'll be thinking more like, a big telescope, especially bigger than the ones we can launch right now. That'll be its bread and butter, because you can imagine some spacecraft are in the planning, but they've never got past that stage because they've never had a vehicle that could carry it. So I wonder if there is a crop of proposed satellites and spacecraft out there ready for Starship to become operational, for them to say, right, now we've got a launch system for it. Now let's go forward with it. And that excites me a lot, because I just know from back during the shuttle days, why would I bring up shuttle? Back during the shuttle days, yeah, they had these massive DoD payloads, which we never saw because they were classified, and they were huge spacecraft, which none of the current rocket systems would launch these days. Those could be an example of spacecraft that exist but have not been put forward because they've not got the launch system to launch them yet, and they could now come back into the light because of this system. So that excites me the most, is not knowing but looking forward to it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and expanding on what you said about LUVOIR, it's as part of the next great observatory, which is a new NASA program they'll be announcing next year. There's 4 telescopes, and I know at least LUVOIR, but I'm not sure about the others. It wouldn't surprise me. LUVOIR, they're proposing it without a launch vehicle that's capable of launching it, and I don't know if it's the first time that's ever been done, but it's the first time I've ever heard of it. A mission being proposed that currently cannot be launched right now.
Yeah.
So they said that both variants of LUVOIR, both the smaller and larger version, could fit in Starship, and the render you were talking about was the smaller version of LUVOIR. So it's not launching until 2039. So I think the SpaceX has a little bit of time, but
I would hope in 19 years that Starship is online by then. I mean, obviously it's not exactly easy to do rocket development, but 19 years is a decent amount of time.
yeah, I think they
I
give
will
a
say
bit of
right
margin.
now, if SpaceX is still doing 150-meter hops with SN5020, I think they might give up on the idea about that.
Yeah, they might change gears and
and
try something else if it takes
let's
that
try
long.
something else.
Maybe by then they'll be doing 150-meter hops of the 18-meter Starship.
Right.
Yeah.
We got a super chat here from Future Martian who says he's been waiting for this show all week. Such an amazing week for spaceflight. It really has been a busy week, and thank you so much, Future Martian, a regular on the show. Appreciate your support. We also got another super chat from Lyrkicus. I hope I got that right. Fresh brewed coffee and stay down to watch the daily NASA spaceflight video. Well, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate the support. We also got a super chat from Ron Morris. Ron, appreciate the support. Thanks for tuning in. And we also got one more super chat that's going to lead into something that we're going to go into before we move on. Another regular, Moldy Space Industries, says hi, and also, hey, chat, let's use today's super chat money for Austin Bernard's GoFundMe. And I'm going to bring this up for those who may not know what we're talking about. Before we move on to another segment, we've got a good friend down in Texas by the name of Austin Bernard. He's a launch photographer, among other things. And he's always down at Boca Chica taking photos and videos. You got the chance to see the hop test a couple of days ago. And he's a great friend of all of us here at NASASpaceflight. And unfortunately, his father did pass away recently after battling COVID-19. And his family has been obviously hurt by this, both emotionally and financially. Lots of medical bills that they're now worrying about. And we just want to give a brief shout to hopefully draw some attention. They do have a GoFundMe page to help them, Austin and his family, out with those medical bills. So if any of you are willing and able to give that a chance and potentially even throw $1 their way, we'd greatly appreciate it. We want to help our friend Austin and his family out. So that link, I believe, Michael, can we get that link in chat so people have it? We'll try and get that link in the chat for you.
It's in.
It's already there. Perfect. So there you go. So just a brief mention. Go help our friend Austin out. He deserves it. He's a great spaceflight photographer and everything. Go check him out on Twitter too for awesome photos and things like that.
Absolutely.
Moving on, we've got some other news of the past week. We've got a launch recap. And Ian, what launched in the past week other than Starship SN5?
Yes, we did have a Starlink launch with Falcon 9. It was the Depending on who you're asking, it's the ninth or 10th Starlink launch. So the ninth operational, 10th overall, and that's a whole mess I'm not even going to touch, even though I already did. But yes, we saw a successful Starlink launch that went off at 1 a.m. On August 7th. It was a successful launch carrying with the first stage B1051. And if you remember, that was from the Demo-1 Crew Dragon launch. So this was its fifth flight. So it's really a workhorse stage. It landed on the drone ship successfully, so hopefully they'll get it ready for a sixth. But this also carried two Black Sky satellites on board, and those were carried on a sort of dummy Starlink satellite, and they were released early on in the launch. And for Black Sky, those will be used for observation and mapping. It's really interesting to see SpaceX is opening up Starlink launches for ride shares now. And also this week, we had a Long March 2D launch. That launched out of the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center, and that was carrying a Gaofen 9 satellite. And what Gaofen is, it's sort of an Earth observation satellite. They use the data from that for several civilian purposes in China, such as agriculture, road planning, and urban planning. So it's really sort of a planning satellite, and they use the imagery from that for all that. And so this week, and those are the two launches, including Starship SN5 this week.
All right, and now that was our last week of orbital launches, and we've got some new orbital launches coming up this week, moving forward, right, Ian?
Yep, absolutely. We got another two coming up. So the first off, we'll have Electron's return to flight. That'll be its 14th launch following an issue on the last launch, PIX, or it didn't happen. And Rocket Lab released a statement about a week ago detailing what exactly happened on that flight. And they detailed that there was an issue with a wire coming loose, and that causes the pumps on the second stage Rutherford engine to rupture. So they've done some additional testing on there to ensure that this does not happen again, and they feel comfortable enough just over a month after their failure to fly again. And so this will be launching. The payloads are not known right now. They have not published anything other than the launch date. So that'll be launching from LC-1A on the Mahia Peninsula in New Zealand. And then also coming up later this week, we have an Ariane 5 for Arianespace. That'll be carrying three larger satellites. It's BSat-4B, which will be a communication satellite for a Japanese company. That'll be a backup to the BSat-4A and nearly identical to that. Also launching will be Galaxy 30 for Intelsat. That'll be one of their communication satellites going to a geostationary orbit. And then also carried on board will be the MEV-2 for Northrop Grumman, or Mission Extension Vehicle 2. And that'll be connecting to the Intelsat 10-02 satellite. And what it'll be doing is, since Intelsat 10-02 is nearing the end of its life without any fuel, the Mission Extension Vehicle, as its name describes, will attach to the back of the Intelsat satellite and sort of be the propulsion section. So it'll enable the satellite, which its communications and its onboard computer are working perfectly. It'll allow it to last for at least 5 more years. So they'll be able to get much longer lifespan out of an existing satellite rather than needing to build an entirely new satellite, buy a launch for it and launch it up. So it'll be able to save them a large amount of money. And that'll be launching on August 14th from French Guiana.
There you go. So a couple orbital launches coming up this next week, and that wraps up our week in space news, which means we've gotten to the point in the show where we like to call Max Q&A, where we're going to go back to any of the questions that we didn't get to earlier in the show, as well as any new topics that we might not have talked about yet. And I'm going to jump right in because a bunch of questions about a topic we did not dedicate a full segment to this week, but definitely just came out yesterday. We've got some big news out of the U.S. Department of Defense, the Air Force, and the Space Force, which recently awarded the National Security Space Launch contracts. They awarded to ULA and SpaceX basically the rights to launch the next 5 years or so of national security space missions. And basically announced which two companies were going to be taking care of that. And the result was 60% of these missions are going to be launched by United Launch Alliance. That will be primarily with their Vulcan rocket that you see, their new Vulcan rocket debuting next year. I believe they have permission to use the Atlas V as well for initial missions if Vulcan is not quite ready yet, although the Phase 2 missions don't start till 2022, I don't think. So Vulcan should be online by then. But that is 60% of the missions going to ULA. And then the other company selected was SpaceX, and they were going to be selected to use their Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy rockets to support national security missions. So Those are the two companies selected. They will be launching all of the well, not all of the national security missions, the big high priority missions. There's also like commercially procured national security missions. You remember SpaceX has launched an X-37B spaceplane mission and an NRO mission, both which were like outside the NSSL program. So the bulk of these missions will go on Vulcan and Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy flights, and that was big news coming out yesterday. But there were two entries that were not selected. First of all, New Glenn, the Blue Origin orbital rocket currently under development, which they bid for NSSL, was not selected. Blue Origin does still have a horse in the race, though, because they do build the BE-4 engine that powers the first stage of Vulcan. And also, New Glenn will be a very viable commercial launcher. It is reusable, like the Falcon fleet. And so, personally, I mean, I don't know. I'll get your guys' input on this, but I think that New Glenn and Blue Origin will be fine without this national security contracts. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I do. I think they'll be fine because it's not just the fact that it wasn't the only horse in the race as far as their contracts, the future contracts go. It's they've got all the funding behind it with Jeff Bezos. I think it's just raised, according to Michael Sheets on Twitter, when his latest article, they've raised another 3 billion or something. And that just shows they've got money to burn. So they've got all the patience they can have, and they certainly do use a lot of their patience to get this ready. But I think because of the commercial aspects of it, it wasn't just relying on this contract, unlike another vehicle we can mention.
And then what about that other rocket that was not selected? Because there was a fourth company that bid for a national security space launch, and that was Northrop Grumman with their new Omega rocket, and that was also not selected. And there's some potentially big implications there, right?
That's the one I was referring to. That's a really bad situation for them. And their press release was quite telling. They only noted their disappointment and were waiting for a review of the problems with their bid. They said nothing about, like Blue Origin did. They said nothing about commitment towards continuing development of this program because they've got no real commercial customers as far as I can imagine. I think it was all to do with national security launches. And it's a real shame because unlike Ares 1, this is a very good vehicle where it's a solid first stage and it's got its little side boosters and it's got its payload capability. They're building the mobile launch platform at the Kennedy Space Center right now. Mouse gone. They are basically ceasing the program right now. It's so sad because people involved with these rockets, and we can all have our favorite rockets, we can all have our problems with rockets, but there's still people involved with these systems, and that's disheartening if they do discontinue this program because this particular family of rocket has gone through Ares, it's gone through Liberty, and he went to Omega, and it still can't make it. So it's just really quite sad for this variant of rocket, which is impressive. It's got a lot of capability, but can they find customers for it outside of this contract? I don't know.
Yeah, as an Ares 1 fan, and I know Crispy strongly disagrees with me, but I was really looking forward to, as a rocket fan, to seeing Omega launch because it's got solids on solids on solids, which is super cool. And it is basically the continuation of the Ares to Liberty to now Omega lineage. And I mean, personally, again, we're going to wait till Northrop Grumman makes decisions on this. This literally came out yesterday. But the idea, I mean, they had one customer for their very first demo mission for two small satellites from Saturn Networks or Saturn Satellites or something. But those were for two satellites that haven't been built yet or anything. And that was kind of the only customer that had been announced for any Omega launches. So there's certainly viable or certainly plausible that Northrop Grumman goes, we don't really have a customer base for this rocket and has to cancel this rocket. As a rocket fan, I wanted to see it go. I would love to see this thing launch, but objectively look at it from the decision-making point of view, I'm not sure there's a market for it. There's a lot of new commercial launches coming online. You've got a very reliable lineage supporting the ULA Vulcan rocket. And to be fair, Northrop Grumman is not really in an issue here by not being selected.
No.
They build the solid rocket boosters for the Vulcan vehicle, so they've got support out of this contract really. But their own launch system in Omega, I'm not sure it's going to survive this non-selection here.
Let's quickly add one last thing before we go back into the questions. This was the only other vehicle that's going to launch from 39B.
That's true.
39B was set up as a launch complex, multi-user launch complex. It was part of their funding cycle. They have to find more rockets and SLS launch from there. Otherwise, it'd be a launch cadence of 1 to 2. Well, it won't be 2. It'd be 1 a year at best with SLS from 39B. The whole funding for the redesign of that pad was so it could be a clean pad to launch several different vehicles from, and now it's down to 1. It's quite a serious situation for KSC as well.
And it was also going to be built in the vehicle assembly building, right? Along with
Yeah.
SLS. So that's another VAB tenant also gone. But again, there's a chance that they will find commercial customers or other government contracts, and we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, we'll just have to wait and see, I guess.
So.
But moving on, we've got a whole bunch of questions, and we're going to do max Q&A rapid fire here. Real quick, we've got a super chat. Sam, $20. Thanks again for the great commentary. Any chance that NSF, I'm assuming that means NSF, can fund a permanent photo site for Mary at Boca Chica? The important thing to remember when we're going down to Boca Chica is Mary has to stay outside of different safety zones, keep herself safe. There's all these roadblocks and closures to make sure people don't get too close to Starship test operations. It's not safe to be super close in the unlikely event of an anomaly. And she does live in the village, so she's permanent enough there. And we want to make sure our first priority is to make sure Mary is safe and things like that, and filming both safe for her and also out of the way of all of the SpaceX operations. So that's our priorities down there. But thank you for the super chat, and we're glad you're enjoying the Boca Chica content. Let's go right along to some rapid fire questions. And we've got a question we mentioned earlier. We were looking at some photos of Starship, and we had a question about the small black tanks on the side of Starship. I'm going to try and pull up a picture really quick. Let's see. Here you go. Here's a picture of them. Who wants to describe what those tanks on the side of Starship are?
I could take it.
Go for it.
So what those are COPVs, or carbon overwrapped pressure vessels, and those are used to contain high pressure gases. And with Starship, it's not entirely certain what they're used for, but it's very likely for tank pressurization. We also see those used on Falcon 9, both on the first and second stages, and we've seen them cause issues in the past with Falcon 9's launch failures. But here with Starship, they're mounted on the side, and that seems like it's not going to be permanent when they do the high altitude, high velocity hops, because it seems like those could be ripped off at higher speeds and with the airstream going by. So those are just on the outside, seemingly for right now while they're prototyping. But yeah, those are for high pressure gases, likely just to pressurize the tanks during flight.
There you go. And again, we're just going to rapid fire these questions through. We've got some time left in the show, so we're just going to get through as many questions as we can. Let's stick with the theme of Starship. Predictions of what will happen with Starship SN6.
I think it'd be nice if they used it in some capacity, because it's still it's an identical vehicle to SN5. It just seems a shame not to use it. And then not put it, at least it'll probably be a lawn ornament at that special new cafe area to put down the road with the canard rings, which are like a roof structure over to protect the workers from the heat. So I don't know. I hope they use it in some capacity, but maybe if they use it, that means SN5 had a failure. So we want to see SN5 have a failure. We'll watch it and keep an eye on it.
I saw some people speculating on our the official NASASpaceflight Discord that they could use as a water tower for the village.
There you go.
Yeah.
They do look like water towers, so they fit the part. All right, let's see. Will there actually be large windows in Starship, or do you reckon they will scale it down like Crew Dragon?
I don't know. We've seen the renders, we've seen the animations with these massive glass windows, with violinists floating across in space doing a little concerto for all these space tourists. I don't know if that'd be real or not. I don't know. I think originally, the first ones will start off more like a functional spacecraft rather than a cruise liner, shall we say. I think they can do variants of it. I think they can evolve it. Big, massive glass windows at your front of your super heavy boosted Starship, to me, sounds kind of risky. They do have the I'm going to bring it. I'll do it again. Shuttle had 3 panes of glass on their cockpit windows, and they had a pressure plane, had a protective plane, had a 3-plane system where MMOD would hit it and smash it quite badly, but it'd be protected from the crew. It was never a safety problem, but I imagine these massive windows, MMOD strikes, it'll look quite a mess after a while. So I think they will go for smaller windows eventually.
Yeah, and we're even seeing on their the Starship they proposed for the Artemis program as a lunar lander. You can see on the top, it looks, I'm not sure if it's exactly it, but it looks like to be solar panels up on top. So it seems
Yeah.
like they got rid of the large top window and they only have, I think it's 2 or 3 rows of windows. So it shows they've, at least for the lunar Starship, the non-atmospheric Starship, it seems like they're starting to change the design around a little bit.
All right, there you go. Chris, we've got some Artemis questions, and you're the expert on that topic for sure. Is the EOS mission critical for EM3, also known now as Artemis 3, or can they use the ICPS upper stage?
So they can use ICPS. I think they actually are going to use that ICPS stage now because the EUS is still in the design stage. It's not actually been built yet. They've built parts for it, but it's not a fully finished stage, and they need funding for it to be fully finished. There's certain congressional language in certain financial year budgets which kind of try and kill it every time, and then they reallocate it just in time. But that all delays the project. We do think the first flight of it will be 2025 now or 2026, and that rules it out of the planned human launches, including the lunar landing, which I was hesitating to say there because they're currently aiming for 2024, but I think that's highly doubtful. I think that's politically motivated by a date. I don't think that's a clever way to go. But to answer the specific question, it will fly with ICPS until the US is ready, and that's the 5 or 6 years away.
And speaking of launching stuff for Artemis, we got a question here. Is SLS the only way to launch Artemis payloads, or could components of the Artemis program be launched on other vehicles?
Yeah, Super Heavy could. Sorry, Super Heavy. Falcon Heavy can. And we were looking. I've got Starship on the brain now. It's Boca Chica. I
Yeah.
have dreams about Boca Chica. We're now in a situation where Falcon Heavy has won that award with the national security, and we've seen the render with the big facility and the larger payload. That immediately opens out the question: will Halo and PPE launch on Falcon Heavy in that configuration? I think that makes it very interesting because that is part of the main gateway situation where SLS was originally going to launch it, but now SLS is more idling towards crew launch only. I think SLS cargo is becoming a thing of the past. I think SLS politically is okay, but needs to find a place in the manifest. And I think with these big launches coming capable now, including Falcon Heavy and future Starship launches, I think launching Orion missions on SLS with the added safety, as they like to class it as, becomes its bread and butter. And that cargo missions, such as Halo and PPE, such as Gateway, such as Artemis hardware to go to the moon, will go on commercial rockets.
All right, we've got some questions about commercial cargo and commercial crew. Is there a launch date for CRS-21, which of course is the debut of Cargo Dragon 2? Do we have a launch date for that?
November, I think. I think November of this year or October, somewhere around there. I don't think there's a firm date set yet that's public.
All right, so following the Crew 1 mission, though, so we'll see another Crew Dragon prior to a Cargo Dragon 2. So that gives you an idea there. And then on the same topic, do we know the cost to NASA per launch for Dragon launches, given that they are now reusing capsules and boosters now?
I don't think so with the reuse cost in mind, but I think it was like, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was like 150, 160 million per launch, Dragon and Falcon, with like a Crew Dragon and Falcon 9. But I'm not entirely sure with reuse in mind.
Yeah, some of that stuff stays proprietary, and SpaceX doesn't necessarily disclose the exact numbers, right, Chris?
I was going to say, yeah, it's all proprietary, especially. I mean, they do a very good job with CRS2 contracts and whatever. They'll say what kind of award some bulk total will give towards a company to achieve a certain amount of missions and objectives with that money. But when you break it down, it becomes proprietary, and that's when the companies work it out themselves. And how much impact reusability will have on the contract price is minimal, but what it'll have on the profitability of the contract for the commercial supplier is massive. And that only is a good thing because that takes a lot of stress away, a lot of strain away, lets them keep the schedule, lets them think of other things and building on this technology they've fostered, and they deserve it because they built this reusable technology.
Yep, and I remember when they initially started reusing Falcon 9 boosters, they did give a reduction in price. I think it was around like 50 to 55 million per launch compared to 63. But I remember they brought that back up, so now it's about the same price, 60 million-ish per launch for a base Falcon 9. So I think they might give NASA a bit of a discount, but I don't think they've changed the contract. So I think it'll be just SpaceX saving money, at least for these initial missions here.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And we've got one final question before we wrap things up here. And this question was originally dedicated straight to Ian. I'll also extend it to Chris and the others. But we have a question here as far as your coverage for NASA spaceflight. We'll start with Ian. What do you like to follow a specific company or a specific part of spaceflight? What's your favorite to cover?
So I love covering, the main thing I love to cover is like launch pads, ground support equipment. I don't know why that really, that's something that really excites me. But also I like SpaceX Rocket Lab. But I try to do everything. I'll do like spaceflight missions. I'll do probes, things like that. I just try to go do everything to dip my toes in.
Chris, what about you? What's your favorite thing to write about or cover?
When I started the site, I spent every day after work writing one article a day without fail, every day of the week on shuttle. And it was always shuttle. It was nothing but shuttle.
Mm-hmm.
Then suddenly there were things like CEV, which is the original version of Orion,
Mm-hmm.
and new vehicles, and Sea Launch, which were a fantastic company launch for an oil rig. There was Atlas V launches, and suddenly this guy called Elon Musk, who had founded PayPal, and PayPal was our support structure for L2, still is. So that's how I knew his name. He went into the business of trying to buy a Russian rocket and decided he couldn't do it, so he's going to build his own rocket. And there was just something different about what he was saying. We've got some interviews with him from the early days before the launch Falcon 1, which were majorly ambitious to the point of sci-fi. And I thought, if he pulls this off, it'd be a game changer. And he has, and he is. And that fascinates me a lot. But it makes me want to look at other new rockets as well, and what they could achieve, what they might bring to the table, what they may actually achieve as well from what they're saying. It's just Elon has set a roadmap where things aren't impossible anymore. People can make bold statements and it's not impossible to achieve. And that's why I find every single rocket possible of interest to me.
That's a great answer, and I kind of similar to you. I think, for when I first joined NSF, actually, when I first asked Chris B, "Hey, can I come write for NASA spaceflight?" He asked me, what part of spaceflight interests me? What's my thing? And I believe the answer I gave, and I think this is still how I describe what I go about. What do I want to write an article about? It's what's next, what's new and coming from existing companies or new companies or existing space agencies. What's the next step going forward? So I love writing about things like Starship, the new commercial crew missions as they come out, new test flights, things like that. I'm always excited to see what's coming next in space flight. So that'd be my answer if someone asked. But that's going to do it for the Max Q&A segment of this week's edition of NASA Spaceflight Live. Time flies when you're having fun. It's already time to wrap this show up. I want to give a big thank you to everyone who tuned in, and a big special thank you to all of our channel members, which I believe we're going to bring up on screen really quick. We've got some launch directors and flight engineers. Those are the top tiers of our membership program. Thank you so much for all of your support. That support is what allows us to do these live streams, including live coverage of things from Boca Chica and Cape Canaveral, things like that. And also a big thank you to all of our other channel members, as well as those who do super chats in chat during live streams and things like that. All of that support is super appreciated. A huge thank to everyone who subscribes to the channel and everyone who tunes into these shows. We can't do it without you guys. I also want to give a big thank you to the production team behind the scene. Michael Baylor is back there running the present modes and scenes and overlays and all that stuff, putting all of this together for all of you guys. So a big thank you to Michael. Also a big thank you to John Galloway, who has helped us set up all of this live stream stuff. A big thank you to him. A big thank you to Mary, Boca Chica gal, who has captured all of those amazing photos and videos that we show from Boca Chica every week. Big thank you to her. And then, of course, a big thank you to the two gentlemen to either side of me, Chris Bergin, managing editor of NASA Space. Oh, I pointed to the wrong way. I had a 50-50 chance. My screen's mirrored. Chris Bergin, managing editor of NASA Spaceflight. Thanks for hanging out. And also Ian Atkinson, writer for NASA Spaceflight. Thank you for joining me today. And before we leave, we have to plug. I'm going to ask Chris B to stand up a little bit because we've got to plug merch one
Oh.
more time.
Yeah.
We've got the Orange Rocket Good shirt. We've also got on my other screen, I believe Michael can show it. We've got a shop if you want to get things like the Orange Rocket Good shirt or Boca Chica shirts and things like that. Head on over to nasaspaceflight.com/shop. That's another way to send support our way to support future live streams and videos, things like that. If you see anything you like on your screen right there, go ahead and check it out. All of those proceeds go towards improving our live coverage and article coverage of all of the spaceflight events and making it better. But on that note, that's going to do it for this week's episode of NASA Spaceflight. My name is Thomas Burghardt. I've been your host along with Chris and Ian. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you guys next time.
RCP chamber pressure looks good. Doubling up. Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Water towers, fly!
Spotted downside of speed off. Off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.
Your audio is, your voice is ever so slightly deeper than it has been before. Something's up with your mic, like.